I'm not gonna give in. I'm not playing a fucking fast. I'm not scared around here. You can't use that shit on me. Happy and free. Proud full of positivity. Say what you believe in. Try fighting uphill with me. But the danger is of conformity. A lot of with no action. Destroyed his corporate thing.
How's it going? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Trad Queen's Story Hour this lovely Wednesday evening. I had a very rushed afternoon. I was doing stuff earlier today, and I ended up not leaving for the DMV until like 3. And let me just tell you, that was the longest 2 hours of my life because usually I come in here and start looking at what we're going to talk about at about 5 p.m. That did not happen today. Today I sat down at 5:42 and pulled up a bunch of stories I'd been sending to myself while I was sitting at the DMV. So I wanted to open with this awesome story. Oh gosh, here comes Dip. Dip, no, please go somewhere else. I'm surrounded by creatures and Andy's not here to come distract them. I wanted to talk about this because this is the kind of news I'm here for because it confirms all of my prior held beliefs. I know that's how everybody looks at the news lately. Experts find another reason why drinking coffee is good for you, and they say the benefits are very clear. Scientists recruited 720 men and 783 women to track coffee consumption levels. Those who drank 2 to 3 cups daily recorded lower blood pressure readings. A coffee a day might be enough to keep the doctor away. For researchers have found coffee and lovers have lower blood pressure and healthier hearts, and the benefits might be achieved by drinking just 1 cup each morning, they claim. Italian experts describe coffee's positive effects as being very clear. The findings from a study of more than 1,500 people add to the growing body of evidence highlighting the drink's health benefits. This is awesome. So my dad and most of my siblings and I constantly talk about the benefits of coffee because all of us are pretty gung-ho about coffee. My mom, I think, is the only one in our family who's not really into it. And even she likes the way it smells. She just doesn't like the way it tastes and the fact that it makes her jittery. But I was like, hey, they've consistently found that coffee is actually good for you in myriad different ways. So this is just one more example of coffee being a fantastic. If you guys don't have an espresso machine, you should surely get one. I was talking to Andy about that earlier today, and I was saying that I think that our espresso machine has been such a wonderful investment because it means that I feel absolutely no desire to go to any coffee shops or to buy any fancy frou-frou coffees. So I think that it's a really good use of money if you can find one relatively inexpensive. I actually think that I saw one at a Goodwill not too long ago, so you should definitely check that out if you are interested in buying an espresso machine. Once again, thank you guys all for joining me. It is now 6 p.m., so we are going to launch into discussion about Ron DeSantis, whom I thoroughly respect. I think he's awesome, and he is making it happen because when he decided to go toe-to-toe with Disney over their insane woke agenda, everybody said that there was no way that he could win. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, but isn't Disneyland in Florida? I don't remember if it was Disneyland or Disney World. I can never remember which one is in California and which one is in Florida, but they have a gigantic campus in Florida, and Ron DeSantis knows this, and he was using this as a tool in the negotiations between Disney and Florida. So let's look at this, and then we're going to look at what's happening in Disney overall, which is not good news for them at all. Ron DeSantis celebrates seizing control of Disney's Reedy Creek Improvement District and warns the corporate kingdom that they will finally have to pay their fair share in taxes. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis celebrated taking control of Disney's Reedy Creek. He warned the formerly self-governing district there's a new sheriff in town. This comes as the Florida legislature proposed a bill Monday giving DeSantis control of the 5-member board for Walt Disney's self-governing special tax district. And I'm willing to bet that they gave Disney the special tax district to convince them to come to Florida because Disney's really good, really, really, really good for Florida's tourism industry. And I completely understand why they would be motivated to kind of financially incentivize them to stay in the state, which good for them. That was a very smart call. But now they have all this leverage to hold over Disney and say, you're not going to be woke. You're not going to put these horrible concepts into kids' movies and all that stuff. But let's read the article. Enough of my commentary. Ron DeSantis warned Disney's Reedy Creek Improvement District there's new sheriff in town and vowed to make the self-governing area accountable for its debts and unable to continue operating under special provisions. The Florida governor lauded his new plan to take complete control of Reedy Creek, which gave Disney unprecedented power over the last 56 years in the area, encompassing Walt Disney Resort. Wow, it's been almost 60 years they've had this power. So there's really been a really long time they've had this complete control of this little chunk of Florida. He also went on the defense regarding critics who claimed ahead of the unveiling of the legislation earlier this week that he was being too soft on Disney and was not going to hold their special self-governing district accountable. Disney is going to pay its debts, DeSantis assured during a press conference on Wednesday morning. What I said really for the last 6 to 9 months is Disney is no longer going to have self-government. They are not going to have their own government. Disney is going to pay their fair share of taxes and honor their debts. And that's exactly what this proposed piece of legislation will do. Good for him. A lot of folks in the media were saying, oh my gosh, Disney's actually going to pay less taxes and Floridians are going to pay more taxes. They were saying that, the governor added, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Well, this puts that to bed, and so these debts will be honored, he continued. This is now obviously going to be controlled by the state of Florida. There's a new sheriff in town. DeSantis seized control of Disney's formerly self-governing district in Florida, announcing this week that the company must repay $700 million in debt and begin paying taxes. And from my understanding, Florida actually has a surplus this year. Because of Ron DeSantis' wise governance, he's being able to give teachers raises, which is really undercutting people's claims that teachers and education are highly undervalued in Florida, which is a spin they're trying to use to say that Florida's banning books and they have this stupid Don't Say Gay bill. Really, he's just acting out all of these classically conservative ideas that include things like not spending a bunch of money on stuff you don't need so that you can then use it to incentivize good teachers. And hopefully he starts to work on the teachers' unions because that's the next big challenge for sure. Greg says Disney World is in Florida. Okay, Disney World for sure. DeSantis seized control. Yep, we talked about that. In a dramatic escalation of his long-running battle against Disney, the Florida governor on Monday announced he was taking control of the 5-member Reedy Creek board. The board oversees nearly 40 square miles of Florida, on which the Walt Disney World Resort is built. Florida is dissolving the corporate kingdom and beginning a new era of accountability and transparency, DeSantis' deputy press secretary told DailyMail.com in a statement. DeSantis will also rename the site, switching its name from Reedy Creek to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District. Interesting. Not sure what all that entails, but probably a wise move if Disney were the ones who gave them that name. Florida is dissolving the corporate kingdom and beginning a new era of accountability and transparency, DeSantis' deputy press secretary told Daily Mail in a statement. Didn't they say that earlier in this article? DeSantis will also rename the site. Yep, okay, I'm just dumb. There we go. A new bill was proposed by Florida politicians on Monday, which would give the governor full control over the district and the ability to appoint the 5-member board of supervisors that run the special district. Dip, please stop falling off the desk. And this is it. This is what the New York Post was talking about yesterday. I meant to get to this article and we just ran out of time. Ron DeSantis' tapped board would control Disney World tax district under plan. Here is Dip's tale for your enjoyment. Reedy or not, here he comes. That is great. I love it. Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is poised to wrest away control of Disney World's special tax district with a remade supervisory board comprised of his appointees. Wasn't he doing something similar with that school in Florida too? Like that uber woke school? Yeah, I remember all of this, I think, started when Disney sided against the Don't Say Gay bill, like actively working to try to make sure that kids got indoctrinated as young as humanly possible. So I'm really not surprised that Ron DeSantis is sticking it to them. So let's take a peek at some of the fallout for Disney. Now, this article I was searching earlier does not mention Ron DeSantis or Florida, but I'm willing to bet that this is at least somewhat related to what's going on there. Disney will cut 7,000 jobs and slash $5.5 billion in costs as it unveils a vast restructuring. Disney said it will be reorganizing into 3 divisions: entertainment, ESPN, and parks and experiences. Disney will slash 7,000 jobs from its workforce and plans to cut $5.5 billion in costs, including $3 billion in content savings. CEO Bob Iger says the company isn't considering a spin-off of ESPN. Disney said Wednesday it's planning to reorganize into 3. Okay, so we have the parks, experience, etc. The move marks the most significant action Bob Iger has taken since returning to the company as CEO in November. Disney announced the changes minutes after it posted its most recent quarterly earnings. The announcements also came as Disney engages in a proxy fight with activist investor Nelson Peltz and his firm Trian Management. Trian didn't immediately respond to a request for comment on Wednesday's Disney announcements. I am so glad that Disney is getting all of this pressure from all different sides. I literally could not be happier, unless they actually decided to change their stance on trying to teach kids about all of this sexually confusing identification stuff, which they've been pushing nonstop. And most recently, I believe that the Proud family is part of Disney. Do you guys remember that lady who was caught on a Zoom meeting talking about how she openly pushes her gay agenda onto everything that Disney does? She goes, I'll put a gay couple kissing in the background, and I'll put a gay this and a gay that, and there's never pushback on it. And I think it's just so fantastic. And I was just like, yeah, okay, you're the problem, lady. You are the serious issue and the reason that I think Disney is facing this. Like, we used to talk all the time on Timcast IRL about go woke, go broke. I'm not convinced that's always the case, because I don't think that there's enough conservative movement against this kind of thing. But it's a serious thing that they need to consider when they decide to start weighing in on politics, because it's certainly not something to be lightly considered. And I wish that more people would think about what might happen when they get involved in politics. I know that Mr. Beast recently, I was noticing that with Mr. Beast lately, he has specifically chosen to not get political, whereas Elon Musk just jumped right into it, and he's like, I think we should have, this and this, and you got to vote your beliefs or whatever, and we need to have a balanced, parties in Congress and the House or whatever. And I was like, dude, whoa, first of all, you're from South Africa. You're not actually an American citizen. And second of all, I don't think that you want to get that involved in politics either way. You shouldn't be loudly voicing your opinions unless you're just actively. The only thing that matters for the person who owns Twitter is that he's pushing the idea of freedom of speech, which he's been really good about. So I will give him the credit where it's due. But at the same time, as Disney is discovering, it's probably not in their best interest to push this kind of political stuff. All right, guys, I did change the chat to live instead of top. Andy says, why you got the mic cord wrapped around like that? So this is because I had Dot on the desk the other day, and she was actively trying to eat the cord, and I didn't have a chance to unwrap it before today's show because I ran into the studio at 5:42. So yeah, I don't love it either, but here we are, and it kept the dog from eating it and destroying it, so I think it's a win as far as I'm concerned. There you go, Andy. All right, thank you all again very much for joining me. Sir Renko, I see. Lori is here with us. Wonderful. Nice to have you guys. Andy says, nice shirt. This is my Public Square shirt. And on the back it says, vote with your wallet, which is 100% what you should be doing when it comes to Disney. I don't know if you guys remember VeggieTales and some of those other kids shows that were made by Christian companies. When I was young, we loved VeggieTales. We really, really did. And we thought it was awesome. And it was probably the least lame Christian show for kids. And I wish that we had more like that. But I do see that the Daily Wire is coming up with a bunch of kids stuff too. And I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's the next frontier. I think that's something what we need to seriously be pushing back on. I know George Alexopoulos came up with kids book recently that he illustrated. It's beautiful. I forget what it's called. Something about berry pie, some kind of berry pie. It's so cute. It has a little mouse, and I need to see if we can order that because I would love to have that, and I feel like it's going to be a collector's item. They did a limited run to start out with. You guys should go over and check that out. He's on Twitter at gprime85, same on Instagram, and I am so excited with where he goes for that. Sorenko says, is Twitter broken for anyone else? Yes, so I went to look at my messages, because it said I had 2, and it just says something went wrong, try reloading, which is too bad because I am working on putting together a group chat where people who are tired of being super concerned about the State of the Union can join and share their good news, positive wins. So here we go. I'd like to start a group chat on Signal, Facebook Messenger, probably not that, SMS, or on here, Twitter DMs, definitely not after this down, for people who are actively fighting being depressed by current events and living in the end of the American era. Let me know if you're interested. So I asked everybody, where would you like to set it up? Signal, SMS, or Twitter? I said vote in the poll, and we will reconvene this evening, which is something I need to do after the show. A lot of people were saying, why not Telegram? And I showed them this. Telegram is not as secure as Signal. Signal is the #1 most secure choice, but like this tweet, if it's the only option you will use. Also be aware Signal means I will have to have your phone number. So Telegram is an increasingly popular cloud-based secure messaging app. It's free. It runs on platforms like Android and OS. But a reason to avoid it is that it is not default end-to-end encrypted, unlike Signal. So I started using Signal reliably when Andy and I started going out because he said, quote, end-to-end encryption saves lives. And it's also part of the reason that we shred so carefully because we are security minded. And it turns out that if you do shred absolutely every piece of paper that comes across your desk like I do, it will be much, 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 much more difficult for somebody who's trying to dumpster dive to find any of your personal information. Because often what people do with shredded documents is they only shred their most important files, and then somebody who wishes them ill can just jump in and be like, oh, well, what's this? They've only shredded like 5 different papers over the last week, so I know those are pretty important or have important personal information on them. Dip is really taking up a lot of my desk right now, and I'm afraid to put my own arm over there because he's in attack position. Yes, he's really giving me the business, so I'm just going to switch over to my left hand. All right, you guys. It seems Twitter is working now. Guess I just needed to complain on Lydia's chat. That's correct. That typically works. If you complain about something, usually that fixes it. However, when I go into messages, I still can't see anything. This is all I have. Dun, dun, dun. I'm not sure why. Don't know what's going on. But, oh well, it's all good. I'm sure it'll be up in no time. All right, we are going to talk about Lion Biden. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. So this is something that the New York Post put together, and I thought this was amazing. Biden's claims versus reality. And this is just some, we lost count. Claim. Some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset. Truth. The biggest lie of the night. No one has proposed this. Republicans want the promise of less spending tied to the debt ceiling. They have not said Medicare or Social Security will sunset. Let me zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. There we go. Claim. We have created a record 12 million new jobs, more jobs created in 2 years than any president created in 4 years. Holy cow, we all knew that was a lie because that was directly tied to the pandemic and all that jazz. And we were looking at it last night where we're like, okay, well, we were up to 12.99 million jobs, whereas if we had just continued on the track we were on when Trump left office, we would have been great. But we weren't. No jobs were, quote, created. After the vaccine was developed and COVID lockdowns lifted, businesses sprang back and rehired many who were laid off. Biden had nothing to do with it. That's right. New York Post bringing the smack down. Claim. Inflation has been a global problem because of the pandemic that disrupted supply chains and Putin's war that disrupted energy and food supplies. Just for the record, I have pals who are in overseas, like the UK and Scotland, and they're talking about how inflation is bad there too. And I said, honestly, I think part of the problem with inflation in other places is directly tied to America's horrific fiscal policies. But let's read what they have to say. Yes, but it was particularly bad here because of the massive spending by the government. Right. I still think that a lot of the inflation in other places was tied to a lot of Americans' lack of spending accountability. Claim. The Inflation Reduction Act is also the most significant investment ever to tackle the climate crisis, lowering utility bills. Truth. Con Edison in New York alone says gas bills will be up 20% this year. Renewables have not been able to keep up with the demand, and regulations have only driven up the cost of fossil fuels. I don't know if you guys saw this, but Joe Biden tried to take credit for all of this stuff with the Inflation Reduction Act, and Twitter, the community notes, went in and put a fact check right on the president's lying tweet. And I am just that made me so happy. I was delighted by that. And they keep doing it too. So whoever is running Joe Biden's Twitter account is having a lot of fact checks placed on them. Maybe they should just stop lying, but that's definitely asking too much. They invested too little of that profit to increase domestic production and keep gas prices down. Yeah, so Joe Biden actually mentioned, I thought this was super interesting because he actually was talking about how he went and spoke to a bunch of these gas companies, and they literally just straight told him, we're not going to invest in the US and it's going to drive up the cost of gas because you're going to punish us just for existing. Because he was talking about how he's trying to put the price of gas lower and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, no, you're not. You're actively working against these companies. And then he's like, oh, well, we're still going to need oil for another decade. We're going to need oil for a lot longer than that. And Joe Biden's refusal to accept that is just a sign that he is not paying attention. And I honestly just feel like he's intentionally trying to put us on a death spiral so that he can remain in office and push this left-wing agenda. It's just disgusting. I've never liked a president less than I like this president, and I include Obama in that. Obama was probably more divisive, but Biden has done so much wrong by everybody in the entire country, even the people who don't realize it. And it's really, really frustrating to watch him get up there and tell us that this is all, going to be fine. Everything's going well. It takes a lot of chutzpah for Biden to claim oil companies haven't drilled enough. He canceled pipelines, would not sign new drilling licenses, and made no secret of the fact he wanted to drive oil companies out of business. And they didn't drill enough? Yeah, he's not wrong. We pay more for prescription drugs than any major nation on earth. So actually what happens is that companies come to the US to innovate, and then we subsidize that, and they pass those savings on to everyone else on earth. So maybe you can find these drugs for less in other countries. That's because of us. It is because of Americans. It is because of American taxpayer dollars. If we stopped subsidizing this stuff, if we made other countries pay as much as we pay, production and innovation in the US would stop. Disgusting. Really disgusting. Let's see what they say. We also have the most innovation of any nation with access to the latest treatments first. That's entirely correct. 100%. Claim, under my plan, nobody earning less than $400,000 a year will pay an additional penny in taxes. Not one penny. We are going to debunk this with a separate article. He is full of hooey, as my parents used to say. They were very careful about not letting us curse. With the increase in the number of IRS agents, they certainly will. And new minimum rates for corporations will be passed along to all of us. Not to mention inflation as a tax. That's a great point too. Something that Biden does not want to talk about is that inflation is a tax on everyone. Claim, because no billionaire should pay a lower tax rate than a school teacher or a firefighter. They don't. Oh my gosh, incredibly infuriating. Truth, the White House claimed in a fact sheet that in a typical year, billionaires pay an average tax rate of just 8%. To get that number, the White House includes unsold stock owned by the 400 wealthiest families as income. That is not the correct way to look at it. They would only pay taxes on it if they sold it. This is called capital gains tax. They would pay tax on it if they sold it. Independent tax analysis showed that the wealthiest pay 22 to 25% a year in income taxes, not lower than a school teacher or firefighter who pay much less. The rich paid a whopping 42.3% of all federal income taxes last year. Claim, in the last 2 years, my administration cut the deficit by more than $1.7 trillion, the largest deficit reduction in American history. Truth, that is only because the deficit dropped when temporary COVID stimulus spending lapsed. The national debt was roughly $27.75 trillion when Biden took office, according to the Congressional Research Service. Now it's $31.43 trillion. He has grown the deficit by more than $3.6 trillion, but less than was originally projected. In the midst of the COVID crisis, when schools were closed, let's also recognize how far we've come. COVID did not keep the doors of schools from being open. COVID didn't stand in front of the doors and say, kids, you can't come in here. COVID didn't close churches. COVID didn't close everything except Amazon and Walmart and the bars. COVID did none of that. Our response to COVID did that. That was a human failing, and we talked about that last night with that great article from Newsweek. They were closed for far too long, is the truth, because teachers' unions were allowed to dictate government policy. That's right. And Biden's response to the education crisis? Not more charter schools, not a focus on the fundamentals, but more money, and obviously pushing more woke CRT nonsense and partnering with the Trevor Project, which is literally funded by the company that makes Lupron, which is a chemical castration drug. Good stuff from the Biden administration. Public safety depends on public trust, but too often that trust is violated. Imagine what it's like to lose a child at the hands of the law. That's what he said. While Tyree Nichols is a tragedy, of course it is. The number of people killed by law enforcement in any year is very small, and almost all of them are armed and in the process of committing a crime. Far more young black men die from gang shootings, something Biden did not mention. Of course he didn't mention that. The enemy always has to be the people who are actually trying to keep the peace. They don't want peace, as we saw from the summer of 2020. Claim. Since we launched our new border plan last month, unlawful migration from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela has come down by 97%. What? Where did he get that number? Truth. That number is questionable because it just looked at 1 week after the new year, but crossings overall are still at record highs. Claim. Today we're in the strongest position in decades to compete with China or anyone else in the world. Truth, except when a balloon sails across the entire United States. Love the New York Post. They're very sassy. I appreciate their articles a lot. So I really appreciate that fact check. He did show a lot of, oh my gosh, he was horrible. I really expected him to be better, but I feel like the drugs aren't working as well for him as they used to. He was slurring and mumbling and stuttering. He's going to be, if he wins another term, God forbid, he will be 86 by the time he is done being president. He will be 80. I think he's already 80, but we'll see. The mic cord twist is how they make mops ring out. That's right. I think that's true. Taxes are passed down during the supply and production chain, and finally, again, a sales tax. It compounds. It certainly does. Balloons are created by inflation. Oh, that all makes sense now. That actually does check out. Well, let's see what the result of all these lies were on independent voters. Dun, dun, dun. Damning verdict on Biden's speech is in. I just stopped being able to talk there. Voter panel says Joe lost independent voters. The GOP's new rising star stole the show, and the president doesn't seem to have enough support to win in 2024. That is putting it very politely. Very nice of you, Daily Mail. Lee Carter is president of Melansky and Partners, a language strategist, researcher, and author of Persuasion, Convincing Others When Facts Don't Seem to Matter. Oh, that sounds like a good book. And this is the author, Lee Carter. President Joe Biden was carried into the White House on a wave of support from independent voters in 2022. After Tuesday night, it is clear he won't be able to rely on them again to win in 2024. While Americans across the board conceded that Biden's second State of the Union address was one of his best speeches, the bar is low. Low doesn't begin to describe it. The bar is like 6 inches underground at this point. And even Democrats couldn't help but cringe over his sometimes stumbling performance. A representative survey comprised of 43 Democrats, 42 Republicans, and 69 independent voters, indicates that Tuesday night did little to advance Biden's political cause and provided more sad proof of America's hardening tribal rivalries. The panel evaluated key moments of the speech and recorded their reactions using equipment that tracked their feedback. In the video clips below, the feelings of Democrats are shown as a blue line, Republicans in red, and independents in green. The higher or lower the line trends reflects the relative intensity of their reactions. Interesting. Oh, so this is as it goes on. That's kind of interesting. Let me see what we can see here.
And then just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie.
Unhinged.
Assail and unleash the political violence. The
dog.
using the very same language the insurrectionists used as they stalked these halls and chanted on January 6th. Here tonight in this chamber is a man who bears the scars of that brutal attack,
Dems liked it.
but is as tough and as strong and as resilient as they get.
GOP and independents did not like it.
But such a heinous act should have never happened. We must all speak out. There's no place for political violence in America. We have to protect the right to vote, not suppress the fat fund.
Democrats love this.
Results of our elections, not subvert the will of people.
Republicans don't, obviously. Oh, it's a really interesting way of gauging what people are thinking about it. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but let's continue reading. In a troubling sign for Biden's likely designs for the White House in 2024, he failed to win over independents, and sometimes even Democrats winced when the commander-in-chief slipped through some of his remarks. All of them. It was really bad. Particularly when Biden goaded his political opponents, Democrats rallied and Republicans recoiled. But when he equated the November 28, 2022 attack on Paul Pelosi, husband of former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, with the January 6th Capitol riots, not only Republicans but also independents pulled back. Yeah, because they know. She's chewing on the scarf that's tied on the back of my chair. I couldn't figure out what she was doing. She's welcome to do that, as long as she's not like destroying cords or anything. We know that January 6th is nonsense, and it sounds like independents are starting to think the same thing, which I'm very happy to see. Thrilled, in fact. Just a few months ago, an unhinged big lie and an assailant unleashed political violence in the house of the then Speaker of this House of Representatives, he said. Here tonight in this chamber is the man who bears the scars of that brutal attack, but is as tough and strong and as resilient as they get, my friend Paul Pelosi. He brought Paul Pelosi to this speech so that he could make this point about January 6th and try to pretend that a drugged out crackhead was actually a Republican operative. He was not. Democrats agreed with a message saying things like, couldn't agree more, cannot give hate and extremism any safe harbor, and I'm glad he acknowledged this. Hate has no home here. Oh my gosh, they literally say these things like hate has no home here. Oh my gosh, they're walking mottos. But independents didn't get the connection, saying, what does Pelosi's husband have to do with this election? Republicans were quick to point out the double standard in calling out a politically motivated attack on Pelosi by a mentally deranged assailant, which he said, while he said nothing of threats to the Supreme Court justices or attacks on pro-life centers. I'm just saying. A mentally ill man armed with a gun, pepper spray, and knife was arrested near Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home in June, and he literally said he intended to kill Brett Kavanaugh and his family, if I recall correctly. He actually verbalized that, unlike the attacker on Paul Pelosi. While party divisions appear prominently in the audience results, they weren't completely immune to unity. When Biden announced plans to buy American, everyone liked it. Yeah, but he's lying when he says that. I do think that regular Americans agree that we should be buying American. We're going to buy American, he read to bipartisan cheers and applause. Tonight, I'm also announcing new standards to require all construction materials used in federal infrastructure projects be made in America. Yeah, no kidding. I can't believe that wasn't the case before. What the heck? Republicans felt he was speaking their language, or at least borrowing it. He stole Trump's line. Independents may have been skeptical, but they were willing to extend him the benefit of the doubt. I thought it sounded good, but wondered about the potential cost difference of buying only American products, and that's a valid point. Things that are made in America tend to be much more expensive because we have outsourced so much of the production to other countries. Democrats loved it. Yeah, definitely bipartisan, which I'm glad to see. The decision to invite the parents of Tyree Nichols, who was beaten by police in a shocking incident in Memphis and later died, also resonated across the political spectrum, and Biden's calls for more resources for community policing were well received. Aside from those bright spots for the president, the focus group was nearly unanimous at points in their disappointment. In a political attack on Republicans, Biden was accused of mischaracterizing the GOP's position on proposed cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Instead of making the wealthy pay their fair share, some Republicans want Medicare and Social Security to sunset, he said. Under a shower of Republican boos, and even with Marjorie Taylor Greene shouting liar, the president tried to walk it back. I'm not saying that is a majority, he added as a caveat. Anybody who doubts it, contact my office. I will give you a copy of the proposal. Doubt. Republican and independent voters turned sharply negative in that moment. But Democrats didn't seem to relish didn't seem to relish in the moment either. However, there's also an indication that Republicans may have overplayed their hand by appearing disrespectful. One independent remarked, "Embarrassing how our president is shouted down. It didn't happen to this extent in the last administration." I don't think that's true at all. A lot of Democrats walked out of many of Trump's speeches. Whether or not that is true, perceptions are important. That's true. One of the biggest gaffes of the night, Biden seemingly admitted that his administration intends to phase out fossil fuels within a decade, eliciting laughter from the GOP side of the aisle. You may have noticed that big oil reported record profits. Biden said, followed with the ad lib, "When I talked to a couple of these big oil execs, they said, we're afraid you're going to shut down all the oil refineries anyway, so why should we invest in them? We're going to need oil for at least another decade and beyond that," said Biden over the laughter. While Republicans and independent reactions were negative, even Democrats couldn't help but reflect their unease. And on what could have been the focal point of the night, Americans' escalating tensions with China, Biden was largely silent, which I knew he was going to be because he can't really say anything about China because he is bought and paid for by China. And I'm not at all surprised he didn't mention this at all. And you guys remember that these messages came out recently about how there were supposedly 3 spy balloons that flew over the United States that nobody knew anything about, and Nora didn't even see it all. And all of the top members of the Trump administration categorically refused. They said it did not happen. And they're just trying to pretend that what happened under Biden was par for the course, but it clearly was not. This is a serious issue. The question then remains, why did he allow this to happen? Oh, right, because China said it wasn't for surveillance. Well, we're going to look at an article about that in just a minute. I also wanted to bring this up. This is from a few days ago. 41% of Americans say they're worse off financially under Biden. And that doesn't sound like a huge number, but they go on to say, this is the highest percentage for any president in 37 years. 16% that's how many people say they're better off under Biden, and 42% report their finances are about the same. Thank goodness for those 42%. Must be nice. My finances certainly are not the same. 41% of Americans say they've become worse off financially since President Joe Biden took office a little more than 2 years ago, according to a new ABC News Washington Post poll. That is the highest percentage to report such a sentiment under any president in the ABC Post polls, which have asked the question almost 36 times since 1986, according to an ABC report. Former President Ronald Reagan popularized the better off phrase. The report added, Reagan was in office from January 1981 to January 1989. In the latest poll, 16% of Americans said they've become better off financially under Biden. 42% said their finances were about the same. That is a really telling sign, and I think the Biden administration would do well to keep that in mind as they move forward. It doesn't seem like they're taking that seriously enough. All right, let's look at what exactly Biden is going to do to win people's love. Bar staff beware. Biden's IRS proposes a crackdown on tips by making servers report cash they take home. This is unconscionable. I hate this so much. Proposal would be voluntary program between IRS and employers that the IRS say would decrease taxpayer and IRS administrative burdens according to the IRS. BS. The proposal is now open to public comment until May 7th. I'm going to find out where you comment on that and tell them that they're horrible human beings for even proposing it. People who get a lot of tips earn very, very, very little actual money. And this is actually incredibly unethical to leverage against them. This isn't the richest people in the world. This is some of the poorest people in the world. But Joe Biden doesn't care. His IRS doesn't care. His administration hates the American people, first of all, but especially seems to dislike people who don't make very much money. First, we saw that with this possible $600, reporting on like Venmo transactions, which I believe they walked back, as well as the 87,000 new IRS agents, which I think they also scaled back a little bit as well, but I am unwilling to believe that until it's for sure gone. The IRS proposed a new rule this week that would crack down on taxing the service industry's tips. The Service Industry Tip Compliance Agreement proposal would be a voluntary program between the IRS and employers that the IRS says would decrease taxpayers and the IRS administrative burdens and provide more transparency and certainty to taxpayers. Oh yes, taxpayers are really benefiting from what the IRS is telling them that they have to do under threat of force and imprisonment. This is insane to me. Yeah, I'm going to figure out how to comment on this, and I'm going to tell them exactly what I think. The program would monitor employer compliance based on actual annual tip revenue and charge tip data from an employer's point of sale charge machine. Participating employers would submit their own annual report after the close of the calendar year, reducing the need for audits by the IRS. You know what I'm going to start doing? I'm going to start taking cash to all of the restaurants that I frequent and make sure that my server has access to that instead of simply tacking it on to a debit card charge. I think that's the way to do it. And that way, if employers choose to report this, that's one thing. But if they don't have to. It's a great idea. I'm such a genius. Well, we'll see what we come up with after that. All right, speaking of China, Beijing busted. U.S. intelligence confirms Chinese spy balloon was a part of global surveillance operation to collect information on military sites across the world. Shocking. You guys remember when China was saying that the balloon is theirs but not used for spying? Yeah, that was a bunch of nonsense. China is an active military threat to the United States. Not only are they waging information warfare with TikTok on the youngest members of our society, they are also actively taking action on the military front. And this is something that we need to take incredibly seriously. So look, here's the map of what happened. Routes of 2 Chinese spy balloons menacing the West. So this is the first one that went over the U.S. It started up in Alaska. So it literally covered like most of the territorial United States. Why we didn't shoot it down over Alaska where there's tons of space? Fully beyond me, except I firmly believe that Joe Biden is in the pocket of China, and you would be hard-pressed to convince me otherwise. So it came down over Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, lots of military bases in these states, North Dakota, and then all the way down across, I want to say North Carolina, one of the Carolinas, where it finally was shot down. Absolute nonsense. Friday sightings over Montana. I don't know if you guys recall this, but the only reason that the Biden administration even admitted there was a spy balloon at all was because a local news channel in Montana spotted it and raised the alarm about it. And they were like, what on earth is this? This is crazy. Here it is being shot down by, I want to say, an F-22 fighter jet, which was very crazy to watch. I just can't believe somebody conducted a poll earlier today that really made me think as I was reading the comments, because they asked, do you think that the military would turn their weapons on the American people? And at first, my initial reaction was, of course not. That's crazy. I know lots of military people, and many of them are, really good, really conservative. They have no issue with normal people. And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, if the police can be asked to turn their weapons on normal people and would certainly obey those instructions, how much more so a member of the military that is conditioned to take orders from the authorities and conditioned to not ask questions about why. And then furthermore, I was reminded about the book Ordinary Men, which talks about the members of the Nazi Party who were just doing their jobs. They were just following orders. And because human nature is prone to the banality of evil, they were behind a lot of the worst travesties in Nazi Germany. Just people who were just checking the boxes, punching the numbers, and then going home to their wife and kids at the end of the day. People who didn't have a vested interest in what was happening at some of these death camps. People who didn't really look at what was going on, who just kept their focus down on exactly what was in front of them and made sure not to know exactly what the Nazis were doing during World War II. So yeah, I think they're correct. And when I was thinking about this military action that they took against the balloon over the coast off the Carolinas, somebody yelled, "That's my Air Force." And I was like, is it your Air Force? Is it really? Are you sure that those people are on your side? Which is an incredibly concerning thing to think about. I was raised in a conservative part of Colorado that was conservative because it was located between the Air Force Academy. It was close to Peterson Air Force Base and a bunch of other, Schriever Air Force Base and all these other places. And also near NORAD, the mountain fortress where it was expected that the president would go if there was a threat to his life, which now is like somewhere under Kansas, somewhere much less interesting than a really neat and majestic side of the mountain. That was always really cool in my mind. But I just had that experience of being around so many conservative people such a red part of the state because of the military. And I was like, well, surely they would push back on the instructions given to them by their commanders. But the more I think about it, the more I don't know. So you guys tell me if you agree that the military could be convinced to turn their guns on American citizens. It's really distressing to think about. I really don't like that idea, but it's definitely something to keep in mind if push does come to shove. Hopefully it does not. Well, we'll see. Biden administration's bad. We don't know what's going to come next. It could actually be somebody worse. Isn't that nice to think about? All right. And finally, as the Biden administration shows their true colors, they suggested they could keep the controversial COVID vaccination entry requirement for travelers beyond May 11th. The shot mandate has reduced the spread of COVID-19, the administration claimed. The policy will be reviewed come May 11th, and changes will be guided by science, they say. How your life will change when COVID emergency declaration ends. Interesting. The Biden administration has praised the COVID vaccine entry requirement for travelers to the U.S., raising fears the controversial curb could stay beyond May 11th. Republicans have been trying to use their new powers in the GOP-controlled House to have the measure scrapped because there is no public data showing it has reduced infections or deaths. But the White House yesterday praised the policy in a statement. Are you telling me that this thing that enabled them to take more power is something that they're really very much in favor of? That's crazy. They're probably just doing it in good faith. They probably mean it in the best possible. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. Everything they do is just like they want more power, they want control of you, they want to censor you, they want to take your money. It's disgusting. The only hope that I have from this is that all of those ridiculous lies that Joe Biden told are starting to turn independents against him. And we can only hope that this ridiculous falsehoods is going to be the death of his administration. I really hope so. Let's see how many countries are keeping this. Countries that have foreign I'm misspelling everything. Traveler vaccine mandates. Let's see. 99 countries that don't require COVID vaccinations for travel, where you can travel now without a COVID vaccination or test. Where in the world can I travel to right now? Countries that are open to COVID-19 vaccine travel. That's not what I'm interested in learning about. Yeah, ridiculous. U.S. House plans to vote to end foreign air traveler COVID requirements. Yeah, I really hope they do. Because it's more of the same. It's always the same. It gets so old. It's like, oh, well, are they going to try to grab more power? Yes, of course they are. Are they going to do it in the worst conceivable way? 100%. Yeah. And I was just like, well, it's just exactly par for the course. They do nothing interesting. All they do is try to gain more power and try to control your lives to more and more minute levels. Are you kidding? Dollars that freaking bartenders earn in tips? That is the lowest possible, most minute level of consideration that you can possibly have. But the Biden administration is willing to go there if it allows them to exert more power over you, the individual. Now, from my understanding, the individual is actually the most important component of America's Republican constitutional republic. This is the most important person. This is the only person who matters. The politicians do not matter. They are the servants of the individual voter. And this has been largely cast to the side by both parties at this point, which is genuinely disgusting. But we need to remember that the Democrats are extremely bad about this. They're making me just despair of the world. All right. Okay, I'm back. Had to look up a God of War video. I am glad that you are back. Love seeing these fact checks. I just wish the average person saw it and realized how much he lies. Well, as we looked at with the independent voters, some of them are starting to wise up. Florida is an old world and California is a far, far away land. I see. Okay. It's a small underworld after all, says Keenan. Yeah, for sure. On the mic cord issue, small zip ties and a black cord. Yeah, I think that we do need to get a black cord because this white one is really dingy in any case. We do have these ties up here, but at the time that I was dealing with it, Dot, I didn't have time to do it. I just had to wrap it out of the way. And speaking of Dot, she's making a fuss out there. She is a mix of two breeds that love to bark, and she is coming to terms with Dip. Hopefully your ears aren't being split too badly. I know this mic is super directional. I'm just going to pretend she's not making noise. Balloons are created by inflation. That's correct. Best joke of the evening. Taxes are passed down. Yes, inflation is also a tax. Twitter killed TweetDesk today. RIP. Been using it for years. Oh yeah, TweetDesk was an interesting app for making sure that you could get all of your information in one place. The mic cord twist is how they, mop's ring out. February 7th, 2022, Germany. Biden said the quiet part out loud. Yes, buy American, but also tax companies so much that they move to anywhere else. Yes, 100%. Andy, I have a book for the group, The Prince by Machiavelli. Ooh, that would be a really interesting book to cover for sure. I'll have to look at that one. I need to read some of these books before we look at them. Tip only in cash to your server. Let the server know why. I will definitely do that. And I hope that either companies won't be interested in joining this initiative or employees will go to companies that don't want to join the initiative. That's the best possible outcome. If it is voluntary, then hopefully employees can take their services somewhere else. Carrying cash makes you a target for muggers. Being a human being makes you a target for muggers. Being a male makes you a target for muggers. Not being able to carry your own protection makes you a target for muggers. I've never been mugged. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I've never felt very much in fear for my physical safety, partly because I'm like physically intimidating to some degree. I don't think most people know how to handle me. I think that they're a little bit intimidated by me, which I think is great. A low tip used to be 10% and a high tip used to be 15%. Now they expect you to tip up to 20% regardless of good service. That's true. They also expect a tip if they like hand you a cup for coffee that you then go over and fill yourself, which is crazy. I agree. Maybe we should change the way we tip. They have a much better way of tipping over in Europe, I think. They don't do it at all. They just pay their workers a living wage or however much they think is fair. Agreed, they would shoot the military on the people. Why do politicians set the bar then proceed to limbo? I don't know. They do set the bar very low. Damn it, Janet. January 6th, Insert riot. Yeah, that's right. Sad for you. Your servers must try to move you to another table. Restaurants I have been going to for the last 11 years know their marriages, and I know their marriages and deaths. Wow, that's crazy. You must have been living in the same place for a really long time. Good for you. How about if your doctor and nurse expect tips? No tip? Oh, well, guess you get bad doctoring. No, thankfully they don't. Yeah, and I remember when I worked at the hospital, we were not allowed to take any kind of anything from anyone. The only real way you could get around that would be by like making the front desk something that they then could share with the break room. So this would literally be like cookies or something. But we couldn't take any kind of monetary compensation, and it couldn't be to any one person. Like when people would want to show their gratitude, they would have to thank all of us, which meant that we weren't able to show favoritism or anything like that. I think that was a positive thing. It bothered me at the time a little bit, but at the same time, I understand. Yes, they are our servants, but people insist on calling them our leaders. That's right. They are supposed to be our servants, but there's such an element of human nature that looks for that celebrity. It's just genuinely kind of gross, and I wish that it weren't the case, but unfortunately you can't really argue with human nature. You just have to kind of deal with it. How about tipping everyone you meet for just doing their job? How about tipping your mailman every week? No tip. Oh, well, your mail got lost this week. Okay, well, that's a federal crime for one thing. I actually was reading something about how they stumbled across a huge mail theft operation operating out of a hotel room in Chicago, which was genuinely unsettling. There is a reason that opening someone else's mail is a federal offense. You are supposed to be able to send anything by mail and expect that no one else is going to look at it other than the actual recipient. And that's worked for a while, but it seems like it's going to be a growing threat. So if you have to, there's no way to make sure that your personal information is going to be protected from all nosy eyes. Like, the only way I can say is to just like take your information directly to the source. But if you have to send it to a different state, then you have a problem too. So it's really a struggle. But it's certainly something to kind of puzzle over. And hopefully we will have enough of a free market that we'll be able to come up with something to solve this problem. Surenko says, aw, Dot. Yeah, she finally stopped barking for whatever reason. I don't know. She loves to tease Dip and chase him, and he likes to bat her in the face if she gets too close. They really have an interesting relationship. There's such a dynamic of like him being a grown-up cat and her being like a little baby puppy. And it's really funny to watch. He does get really annoyed with her sometimes, but for the most part, she's been pretty good. St. Mal says, I'm a retired surgical nurse. I don't take guff in hospitals or clinics. Times I was a patient, I bought pizzas for the floor staff. Yeah, I found that nurses and doctors are some of the worst patients. It does depend on the nurse patient, though. As far as I'm concerned, though, doctors are just the worst patients because they expect to be treated like celebrities. You want to talk about like a celebrity mindset? That's exactly what doctors have when they are forced to be patients, as all of us are at some point. The first Wonder Woman movie made clear that the generals used to lead from in front, where the battle was to serve and protect. That's right. Bought and paid for. That's right. I'm a vet and no, the VA was before Trump. They treated vets like garbage. I know how the VA was before Trump. They did treat vets like garbage for sure. I remember one horrific story where a vet died in a VA hospital, and instead of treating his corporeal form with any kind of respect, they pushed him into the hall and left him there, and then eventually I think pushed him into like a shower room or closet, which is just so disgusting. Like literally a veteran, somebody who served for the country, and you're given the task and the honor of taking care of him, and what do you do when he dies? Treat him like a houseplant or something. It's so irritating to read about that. Okay. Dot and Dip are starting to fight, so I think I'll wrap it up here. Somebody says, just doing my job. Skull and Crossbones. Yeah, that would be the military. T-Rod says, love the show. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you for your encouraging words tonight. Thank you all for commenting and coming along with me on this wonderful adventure into the news of the day, which was a little bit depressing. Tomorrow it will be better, I'm sure. All right, you guys. Until next time. Bye, guys. How's it going?